Hello, welcome to natemareflix. I am Nate, you are you, and a report came out recently that stated the Conjuring Universe is the second most profitable cinematic universe going. It has made over $1 billion, placing it only behind Marvel's MCU, which is crazy to think about because when I look at this franchise that is now 8 films deep with The Conjuring 3 coming out this past weekend, I don't really think of it as having a lot of superior films. I would say there are 2 or 3 films that are good or maybe just slightly above average, and the rest are very, very mediocre to just downright bad. But that being said, we've got 8 films to look at here when we look at this franchise. Let's go ahead and rank them from the worst to the best. Here we go. Number 8 is The Curse of La Llorona, a film that I was actually very excited for when I saw the trailer. I was really intrigued by that trailer because I knew nothing of this folklore. I knew nothing of this monster that has been stalking the nightmares of children in Latin America for hundreds of years. And once I did a little research, I was like, oh, that's some really creepy stuff. That's some good booga booga-like material right there. I can't wait to see this put on the big screen. This is a fun, brazen new path to blaze for the Conjuring Universe. This is so different than everything they've done before. And instead, we got a schlocky, generic, boring, drab mess of a film that the only way it knows to try to scare you is by foreseeable jump scares. Everything about this movie just feels lazy and like it was designed to be a cash grab and kind of fill space until we could get another Ed and Lorraine film. It's instantly forgettable. I actually watched this movie with 2 others. We sat down around 6 o'clock, and by 7, both of them were asleep. That is a terrible thing to say about a horror movie. Did not scare me in the slightest, and it completely wastes its talent. Linda Cardellini and Raymond Cruz just have nothing to chew on here, even though they both come with very impeccable acting chops. At number 7 is The Nun, and when we all saw Valak in The Conjuring 2, I think we all really did believe that we had a new horror icon, because that creature is so imposing, so menacing, and the concept, the design, it is just heinous, it just reeks malice, and it is nightmare fuel, so we couldn't wait to get more of it, to explore the mythos of this creature in a prequel. And though I don't typically like or look forward to prequels, I did this one because they cast Vera Farmiga's younger sister who looks almost exactly like her. So it kind of set this thing up in our minds to where we were like, oh no, do they go way back? Do they have bad blood? Has this nun demon been haunting Lorraine Warren for a long, long time? I can't wait to explore this and see more. And instead, we got a CGI mess that only has a little bit of good gothic atmosphere to offer you. Not a whole lot else. We have some real ham-fisted comedy. We have scares we've seen 1,000 times before. We have a really messy script with some convoluted plot and just a complete butchering of what was potentially a fantastic entry in this franchise. This should have been one of the best films when you look at The Conjuring 2 and how people were talking about that nun demon coming out of the experience of watching The Conjuring 2. A lot of people were looking forward to this film. That's why it did so well in its opening weekend. It made so much money. We all expected to have a new horror icon, and instead we were left with one of the worst horror movies of that year. At number 6, it's the new one. It's The Conjuring 3, and this comes compliments of the director of La Llorona, so he's not really faring too well in this ranking, but I will say I think his direction was much more on point with The Conjuring 3. In fact, I don't think there's a lot to say negatively about the technical aspects of this film. I think it's shot well. I think they do some fun camera work. I think the lighting is used to great effect, but at the end of the day, it's just not a very scary film. I think that they got a little misguided in thinking they needed to focus more on the love relationship of Ed and Lorraine, which is not really why we come to a horror movie. I don't care what all the Instagram memes tell you. This whole Ed and Lorraine relationship thing is not why we come to the Conjuring films, at least not the primary reason. So that strong opening of this film gives you, it's completely wasted with the second act that just draws on and on and on. It gets very dull. There wasn't a whole lot going on in this film that makes me want to revisit it. I don't know if I'll ever watch this one again. I probably will just because I'm such a horror dork. But I was really let down by this movie, especially knowing that we were going to have a master Satanist. When you say the phrase master Satanist, you just think the epitome of evil. Again, you think you're getting another horror icon. You think this is going to be the most scary and imposing threat the Warrens have faced off against yet in any one of these movies, and that is just not what transpired. Not a whole lot did transpire in this movie. I definitely felt the runtime of it, and every time I thought something cool or scary was about to happen, it did not live up to the expectation, whether that be them venturing plunging down into the underground tunnels that belong to this master of Satanism, or it be them in the autopsy room, the morgue. You see Lorraine holding on to the fingers of the bloated dead corpse, and you know something bad's going to happen, but what was coming up in your mind, what the hairs bursting in the back of your neck told you might be in store for you, that didn't transpire. Instead, really generic, boring scares you've seen 1,000 times transpired, and a few that maybe you didn't see, and that's because they just didn't work. Case in point being the big fat guy ghoul that just comes running and stumbling about and then crashes into tables and such. Just not the most effective, scary film. A very kind of boring film, and one, like I said, I'm not looking to revisit. Hey guys, we're going to take a break from the video just really quickly to say thank you for watching. Please be sure to hit like and to comment. Let me know your favorite Conjuring film. Hit me with your ranking. We can all talk about and discuss this franchise down in the comment section. And if you have not subscribed, please do so. It would help me out so much. And I can then continue to keep bringing out fun stuff like these rankings, like reviews, like what actually happened in The Conjuring 3. That is a video that I'm thinking about doing where I look at the events of The Conjuring 3 and I tell you what happened in real life versus what happened on the silver screen. But there you go. That is my spiel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Now back to the ranking. Number 5 is the first of the Annabelle films. And when I first saw this film, I didn't quite see what all the hate was about because I actually had a good time with this in theaters. And I would say that every movie in this franchise, it fares much better when you have the, hey Nala, everyone say hi to Nala. All these movies, they fare much better in theaters when you have like the Dolby surround sound, you have the great big picture, all the effect is heightened. And then I went and watched this movie at home and it just didn't translate. It didn't work for me. It was very messy. The film couldn't really decide on its antagonist and how it worked. Was the doll just the conduit? Was the doll the main threat? Is it that black demon that we keep seeing? The dead girl, Annabelle, who died and her blood fell into the doll, is she an actual force or is the demon just taking shape of her? The movie gets very messy and I'm not sure it can even provide the answer for you. Again, a lot of the scares you've seen 1,000 times before, but the reason this movie is a bit higher is just that I liked all of the nods to Rosemary's Baby. I thought the setting was well done. I think they captured the time very well, and this cast is just very likable. I really did like this couple and actually found myself rooting for them much more than I do Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga at times in the Conjuring movies. Number 4 is Annabelle Comes Home, and I just gotta say, if you had told me after the first Conjuring film that we were gonna eventually get a movie that explored all the items in the Warrens' basement and their little museum that they keep, I would have been psyched. I mean, I would have been so stoked and think we're gonna get a nice rated R film that just grasps you and never lets you go, but that's not really what we got. This movie feels very PG or PG-13. It's very family friendly and the type of scares it goes for. There's a werewolf in here that I don't think was rendered or designed all that well. None of the monsters in this actually feel all that capable or potent. You just never really fear for too much. The peril, it doesn't come through. It's not palpable. This feels like the type of scares you'd get if you went to a Disneyland or Universal, you went through a ride like Haunted Mansion. We're like, ooh, look at the ghouls. This is kind of cool, huh? This is fun, isn't it, little Timmy? Don't worry, we're all gonna be okay. We'll get a funnel cake after this. That's the type of ride that Annabelle Comes Home is. That being said, there is fun, but not a whole lot of scares. Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, they were used heavily in the advertising for this, but you know, the Warrens, they don't really factor in this too much. Their daughter does, and then her friends. I thought some of the plot involvements were just a little bit hokey. I thought they tried to create some sentimentality where it didn't really need to be there, and it didn't necessarily come through the way that they wanted it to. So it's an okay enough good time that I think younger audiences, or maybe people who don't watch a ton of horror, I think they will get more out of this, but this movie doesn't offer a whole lot for horror diehards. Number 4, if you do want an Annabelle movie that has something for horror diehards, then I would direct you to check out Annabelle Comes Home. This is the best of the 3 Annabelle films. This has the most atmosphere. This has the most scares. This makes the most use of that black demon that I referenced earlier. It has some of the strongest acting. It has this nice rural setting, and it plays with isolation. It plays with religion. It plays with family. It has all sorts of great constructs within it, and there's just a whole lot more going on with this film than either one of the the other Annabelle films, which both of those are just very flimsy. Everything is very surface level. This film has something that is right there on the surface, is scary for what's right in front of you, but it's also got a little bit of depth, something that you may sit with, and you'll remember this movie more in the long run. This movie stars Lulu Wilson, who's putting together a really nice resume for a child actor in the horror genre with this film, with Ouija, Origin of Evil, and then with Becky. I can't wait to see what she's going to do as her career unfurls, and this is just a great little horror movie. It's not an all-time great by any means, but for what it is and what it could be when you look at the other two Annabelle movies, it's just so much more than we would have expected going into this film after the first Annabelle. Number 2 is The Conjuring 2, and for my money, I think this movie might be the most intense and the most scary of all the films in this franchise. I was actually working at a movie theater when this movie came out, and we had people running out of the auditoriums, we had women crying, we had big burly redneck boys walking out of the theater afterwards and being like, man, that's bullshit, how am I supposed to drive home alone in the dark by myself after watching that wickedness? And I just thought that was awesome. It got me pumped to check out this movie once I got a chance, and then when I watched it, I had a good time. I wasn't affected the way everybody else seemed to be, but there was a lot to admire about the film. James Wan is always great when directing horror. He really knows what to do. I mentioned fun camera work with The Conjuring 3. This one probably has the most fun camera work in the entire franchise. Lots of long shots, lots of stuff that make you go, how'd they do that? That's really inventive. Man, that James Wan, he just goes for it. But also a really palpable energy and atmosphere. I love that they set it in England. Well, I guess you have to because it explores the Enfield haunting. But I like what they did with that haunting because they kind of show you that, hey, this is Ed and Lorraine Warren, and this haunting has been kind of diagnosed ad nauseum. And so a lot of us know, or at least most of us know or think that this was definitely a hoax. And they kind of put it out there for you to make your own conclusion. They play with, was this an actual haunting or was it a hoax by the family? There's also a lot of depth to this movie when you look at the fact that this family is missing their father figure. And so a lot of the scares come from the dad's old lazy boy, the remote tinkering about, them not having money, stuff like that. There's just a whole lot going on with The Conjuring 2. And then of course it introduces us to Valak, which I told you earlier, I thought after seeing The Conjuring 2, that was our new horror icon. Valak was so imposing and terrifying when it first came on screen. That moment when it's in the little studio, Nala's back, and it grabs the painting and starts charging Lorraine from across the room, that got everybody in the auditorium, and I still love that scene every time I watch this film. There are a lot of great scares throughout, a lot of amazing sequences. The problem is the film is just maybe a little overly stuffed, a little too long. You do feel the runtime of this film when you watch it, which does kind of dampen how often that I want to revisit it, just because I know it's a bit of an undertaking. But all that being said, it's got the atmosphere, it's got the scares, it's got great characters, it's got a great villain. It's a whole lot more than what you could ever hope for from just any old horror movie, and that is why it is one of the upper tier horror movies in modern history. And number 1, Okay. Yes, The Insidious is not part of the Conjuring universe, but if it was, it would be my favorite. But since it's not, we'll talk about The Conjuring, even though it was also directed by James Wan and it shares a crap ton of DNA. Not Insidious, The Conjuring is my favorite. Now, this movie has a lot of ties to The Exorcist. It wears it on its sleeve, but I think it earns any comparison that it draws to The Exorcist, just because it is very terrifying for a lot of people. It didn't terrify me, but I had a great time when I first watched it. And I've had a great time every time I've watched it since. We were first introduced to Ed and Lorraine Warren, or at least their cinematic versions in this film, and you instantly kind of root for those two. The family is very easy to invest in. Everybody is well acted. They have a great rapport amongst one another. And just the way they captured the home feeling in this house that they move into, it feels like a real home. Whereas a lot of times when you watch a horror movie, the home, it just feels like a sound stage, or it feels too cold, too polished. It doesn't come through. This house almost feels like a character, which I think you need in any good paranormal movie. You need your haunted house to feel like it is haunted, which means it is imbued by some sort of demon or personality. So it has to convey personality. It needs to feel like a character. This movie captures that, and there's just a whole lot of cinematic magic within this film. When I think of this film, I get iconography instantly in my head. I think of that gnarly tree in the backyard. I think of the hands coming out of the darkness to do the clap. Everybody loves the clap clap game. And I think of the conclusion of this film with the basement exorcism, the mom's eye and nasty teeth coming through the blanket with blood soaking it. That's good stuff. There's all sorts of good stuff throughout this film. James Wan outdid himself with this one. There's a reason it's impacted so many people. There's a reason it launched this franchise. This franchise has now made over $1 billion. I can't really say a bad word about The Conjuring. If you say it's overrated, I would say I understand you may not love paranormal or demon flicks because they all kind of do the same things. You know what type of trappings you're in for, but I would say that this movie perfects those trappings and you couldn't ask to see them executed at a higher level, and that is why it is number one on my list.